My oldest son didn't raise his voice. He simply leaned across the mahogany conference table, the same table where I'd signed my first major contract 30 years ago, and said, "Mom, you're too old to understand modern business. Sign the power of attorney. It's for the good of the company." His name was Ethan, my firstborn. Across from him, my son-in-law smiled. That smile I'd seen 1,000 times. The one that never reached his eyes. My daughter looked down at her manicured nails. Silent. Complicit. Sarah. My baby girl. The room froze. My secretary's fingers stopped mid-keystroke. The lawyer lowered his glasses. Even the air conditioning seemed to hold its breath. And for a moment, I forgot how to breathe. Because in that single sentence, I heard everything they'd been hiding. The late-night phone calls that stopped when I entered the room. The documents they moved when I walked by. The looks they exchanged when they thought I wasn't watching. I'd built this company from flour and sugar and dawn shifts that broke my back. And now my own children were trying to take it from me while I was still alive. CTA. Posthook. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, stay with me until the end of this story. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from today? Because what happened next changed everything. Growing up taught me one unbreakable truth. You either work, or you disappear. I lost my parents when I was 12 years old. A car accident on a rainy Tuesday. One moment they were alive. The next, they were gone. There was no time for grief. My younger brother was 9. My sister was 7. There were mouths to feed, school supplies to buy, a landlord who didn't care that we were orphans. Our aunt took us in, but she made it clear we were burdens. Extra plates at the table. Extra laundry. Extra noise. I started working the week after the funeral. A neighbor who owned a small bakery needed help. The pay was almost nothing, but it came with 1 meal a day and bread I could take home to my siblings. I woke up at 3 in the morning. Walked 40 minutes through empty streets to reach the bakery before sunrise. My hands learned the language of flour, the weight of dough, the heat of industrial ovens that left burns on my forearms, scars I still carry today. But I had a dream. Small. Fragile. The size of a warm dinner roll. Someday, I would have something of my own. Something no one could take away. I studied at night. Borrowed books from the library. Taught myself accounting, recipe formulation, customer service, everything the world never offered to teach a girl like me. By 16, I was running the morning shift. By 18, I was managing inventory and negotiating with suppliers. By 20, I had saved enough to rent a tiny storefront. My aunt laughed. "You, a business owner? You'll be bankrupt in 6 months." I didn't respond. I just worked harder. At 25, I opened my first bakery. It wasn't much. 1 glass display case. 2 ovens. 3 small tables with mismatched chairs I'd bought at a yard sale. But it was mine. Every cake, every pastry, every loaf of bread, I made it with my own hands. I didn't just sell desserts. I sold moments. I remembered birthdays. I learned customers' names. I knew who was celebrating, who was grieving, who needed an extra cookie slipped into their bag with a smile. My bakery became a place where people felt seen. And they came back. Again and again. Within 2 years, I opened a second location. That's when I met him. My husband. Robert. He was a flour supplier. Quiet. Hard-working. Honest in a way that felt rare. He didn't try to impress me with smooth words or expensive gifts. He just showed up on time, delivered quality products, and treated me like an equal. One day, after a delivery, he asked if I'd like to have coffee. I said yes. His name was Robert. We married a year later. A small ceremony. Just us, my siblings, and a few close friends. Together, we built an empire. We worked side by side. He handled logistics and expansion. I handled recipes and customer relationships. We opened a third location, then a fifth, then a factory. Within 10 years, we had the largest bakery chain in the region. Our children were born during those years. Ethan first, then Sarah 3 years later. We gave them everything we never had. Private schools, music lessons, summer camps, university funds. We thought we were giving them opportunities. We didn't realize we were also giving them entitlement. Ethan never wanted to work. Even as a teenager, he saw money as something that simply appeared. An allowance, a credit card, a trust fund waiting in the distance. He partied. He drank. He crashed cars and blamed the other drivers. I tried to set boundaries. Robert tried to teach him discipline. But Ethan had learned to smile, apologize, and wait us out. He knew we'd always forgive him. Sarah was different. Quieter. More obedient. She studied hard. Made us proud. But when she brought Michael home, I felt something shift in my chest. He was handsome. Charming. Well-dressed. He said all the right things. But his eyes were calculating. When he looked at Sarah, I didn't see love. I saw strategy. When he looked at our family business, I didn't see respect. I saw opportunity. I pulled Sarah aside one evening. "Are you sure about him?" I asked gently. She smiled. "Mom, you worry too much. He loves me." But I'd built a business on reading people. And Michael was lying. Still, I stayed quiet. Because I wanted my daughter to be happy. And because I hoped, desperately, that I was wrong. Robert died 3 years ago. A heart attack. Sudden. Brutal. Final. He collapsed in our home office, surrounded by invoices and expansion plans. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was gone. I didn't cry at the funeral. I was numb. Frozen. It wasn't until 2 weeks later, standing alone in the factory at dawn, that I finally broke. The smell of fresh bread. The hum of the mixers. The warmth of the ovens. Everything reminded me of him. And I realized that the company, the dream we'd built together, was all I had left of the man I loved. So I worked. I worked to feel close to him. I worked to silence the grief. I worked because stopping meant facing the emptiness. Ethan showed up at the office occasionally. Usually hungover. Always asking for money. Sarah visited with Michael. But I noticed he was the one asking questions about finances, about contracts, about succession plans. Planning for the future, he'd say with that smile. But I knew better. He wasn't planning for the future. He was planning for my death. 6 months after Robert's death, I hired a new accountant. Clara was young. 28. Serious. Precise. She didn't flatter me or treat me like a relic. She treated me like a businesswoman. During our first meeting, she reviewed the books and frowned. "Mrs. Thompson, there are some inconsistencies here. Small withdrawals. Irregular transfers. I'd like to investigate further." "Investigate," I said. Most people would have dismissed it. Called it administrative errors. But Clara didn't dismiss anything. She saw me. Not as the old owner. Not as someone's mother or widow. She saw me as someone who still mattered. "You built this from nothing," she told me one afternoon. "Don't let anyone make you forget that." I didn't forget. But I was about to discover that my children had. 6 months ago, I called a family meeting. I wanted to discuss succession planning. The future. How to protect the company that carried Robert's legacy. Ethan arrived late. Reeking of alcohol. Eyes bloodshot. Sarah came with Michael. And Michael brought a lawyer. A lawyer I hadn't been told about. I started to speak. I explained my vision. Sell a portion of the company to a larger corporation, modernize the remaining operations, ensure long-term stability for everyone. Ethan interrupted. "Sell? Are you insane? This company is MY Inheritance. Michael leaned forward, hands clasped like a concerned advisor. Mrs. Thompson, with all due respect, you don't understand the current market. Perhaps it's time to let the younger generation take the lead. Sarah looked down, said nothing. I tried to continue, but they weren't listening. They were calculating. Ethan saw cash. Michael saw control. Sarah saw whatever her husband told her to see. I left that meeting with a stone in my chest. They didn't see the company as a legacy. They saw it as an ATM machine. And they were just waiting for me to die so they could access it. 2 weeks later, Clara knocked on my office door. Her face was pale. Mrs. Thompson, we need to talk. Privately. She closed the door, pulled out her laptop, opened a spreadsheet. I've been auditing the last 18 months of transactions. There's a pattern. She showed me. Small withdrawals. 500 here. 2,000 there. Always just under the threshold that would trigger automatic review. Who authorized these? I asked. Clara hesitated, then said quietly, Ethan. He has secondary signing authority. You gave it to him 2 years ago. I remembered. Robert had suggested it. He's our son. He should learn responsibility. Ethan had learned something. But it wasn't responsibility. How much? I asked. Clara's voice dropped. So far. $240,000. The room tilted. My son. My firstborn. The baby I'd held at 3 in the morning while he screamed with colic. He'd been stealing from me. There's more, Clara said. I found irregular vendor contracts. A company called Mr. Solutions. They're billing us for consulting services, but I can't find any actual work product. Mr. I repeated. Michael's initials, Clara said gently. Of course. My son was stealing. My son-in-law was defrauding. And my daughter was letting it happen. I told Clara to dig deeper. She worked like a detective. Late nights. Weekends. Following digital trails that my children thought they'd erased. 2 weeks later, she returned with a folder 3 inches thick. Bank statements. Forged signatures. Email trails. Screenshots. Ethan hadn't just been taking small amounts. He'd created false expense reports. Ghost employees on the payroll who never worked a single shift. Michael was worse. He'd established shell companies. Created fake invoices for services never rendered. Charged consulting fees for business development that never developed anything except his personal bank account. Together, they drained nearly $2 million. $2 million. Built for my dawn shifts and burned hands and nights, I fell asleep at the kitchen table doing inventory by candlelight because we couldn't afford to waste electricity. But the worst part wasn't the money. It was the emails Clara found. Messages between Ethan and Michael. Casual. Confident. Cruel. Ethan, the old lady's getting weaker. Did you see her at the last meeting? She could barely concentrate. Michael, we need to move faster. If she changes her will before she goes, we're screwed. Ethan, she won't. She's too sentimental. Still thinks we're her babies. Michael, just keep her distracted. I'll handle the legal side. 6 months, maybe a year, and this is all ours. Ethan, can't wait to sell this place and finally live. I read every word. Every dismissal. Every insult. Every cold calculation. And I felt my heart crack in a way that Robert's death hadn't managed. Because death is natural. Expected. Part of life's contract. But this was choice. My children had chosen to see me as an obstacle. An expiration date. A problem to solve. Not as their mother. Not as the woman who'd sacrificed everything so they'd never know hunger, fear, or powerlessness. Just as the thing standing between them and money. Mid-story seating. If you're still watching, drop a comment and let me know. Have you ever discovered a betrayal you never saw coming? Stay until the end, because I didn't stay silent. I sat in my office that night, alone. The building was empty. Just the hum of industrial refrigerators and the distant sound of traffic. I looked at the photos on my desk. Ethan at 5, covered in flour, laughing. Sarah at 7, helping me frost a birthday cake. Robert and me on our wedding day, young and hopeful and stupid enough to believe love was enough. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream. But instead, I felt something else. Clarity. Cold. Sharp. Undeniable. I'd spent my entire life trying to be a good mother. I'd given them everything. Forgiven everything. Excused everything. And they'd seen that love as weakness. But I wasn't weak. I was a woman who'd built an empire with bare hands and zero safety net. I was a woman who'd survived loss that would have destroyed softer people. And I was done being small to make them feel big. Clara had asked me, "What do you want to do?" Now I knew. I wanted to save the company. Not for them. For me. For Robert. For the 12-year-old girl who believed a warm role could change the world. And I wanted my children to face consequences. Real ones. The kind I'd never been able to give them. Clara and I spent 3 weeks preparing. We compiled evidence. Organized documents. Built an unbreakable case. We consulted with my lawyer, the real one, not Michael's plant. We blocked Ethan's signing authority. Flagged suspicious accounts. Froze transfers. We did it quietly. Carefully. Legally. Because I wasn't interested in revenge. I was interested in justice. And I was interested in peace. My lawyer suggested I simply cut them off. Remove them from the will. Move on. But I knew my children. If I didn't confront them, they'd tell themselves stories. They'd play the victim. They'd convince Sarah I was cruel, vindictive, senile. They needed to see the evidence. They needed to face what they'd done. And they needed to hear me say the words I'd been too afraid to say for 30 years. I scheduled a board meeting. Official. Formal. Witnessed. Ethan, Sarah, and Michael. My lawyer. Clara. 2 external auditors. Ethan arrived first, grinning. "Mom, what's this about? Another one of your visions for the future speeches." Michael walked in adjusting his expensive watch. Confident. Entitled. Sarah followed, quiet as always. I sat at the head of the table, placed my hands on the folder, and began. For the past 2 years, this company has been systematically defrauded. Nearly $2 million have been stolen through false expenses, ghost employees, and fabricated contracts. Ethan's smile faltered. "What? Mom, that's..." "Ethan, you stole $240,000 through unauthorized withdrawals and fake expense reports." I opened the folder, placed the first document in front of him. His signature. His bank account. His dates. "Michael, you created 3 shell companies to bill this family business for services never rendered. You falsified contracts. You forged my husband's signature on documents dated after his death." Michael's face went white. "This is absurd. Someone's setting me up." Clara stood. Calm. Professional. "I personally audited every transaction. Every signature has been verified. Every bank transfer traced. This isn't speculation. It's fact." Sarah's hands were shaking. "Mom, I didn't know." "You knew." I placed the emails on the table. One by one. The messages between Ethan and Michael. The old lady's getting weaker. If she changes her will before she goes, we're screwed. She's too sentimental. Still thinks we're her babies. The room went silent. Ethan's face turned red. He stood up, hands slamming the table. "You have no right. This company is OURS. We're your children. And that's when I said it. I looked directly into my son's eyes. And with a voice that didn't shake, I said, "This company was never yours. It was built with my blood, my hands, my pain, and my husband's dreams. You didn't build it. You didn't earn it. You just waited for me to die so you could steal it. But I'm still here. And now, you're going to face what you've done." Ethan's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Michael stood. "You can't. I can. And I am. Ethan, you're terminated. Effective immediately. Michael, you're being reported to the authorities for fraud." Sarah. My daughter lifted her tear-stained face. "You had a choice. You chose him." I stood. Picked up my purse. Ethan grabbed my arm. "Mom, please, we can fix this." I looked at his hand on my arm. Then at his face. "Let go." He did. Michael was already on his phone, probably calling his real lawyer. Sarah sat frozen, crying silently. I walked to the door. Stopped. Turned back. "I gave you everything. Love. Opportunity. Forgiveness. And you saw it as weakness. I hope someday you understand what you've lost. But I won't be here to watch you learn." I left. No shouting. No drama. Just a clean exit from a story I was never meant to stay in. 3 months later, the company was sold. Not to Ethan. Not to Michael. To a family-owned corporation with values that matched what Robert and I had built. They kept the recipes. The name. The people who'd worked with me for decades. I kept enough to live comfortably. To honor Robert's memory. To finally rest. Today, I wake up without weight on my chest. I have a small house now. A garden. A kitchen where I bake. Not for profit, but for pleasure. Yesterday, I made cinnamon rolls. The smell of yeast and sugar and butter filled my kitchen the way it did 40 years ago when I was just a girl with a dream the size of a dinner roll. I gave one to my neighbor. A young woman, maybe 25, working 2 jobs to pay for night school. She reminded me of someone. "These are incredible," she said. "Did you make them yourself?" "I did," I said. "Would you like the recipe?" She lit up. "Really?" I smiled. "Really? Because that's what legacies actually are. Not money. Not companies. Not names on buildings. But the kindness we pass forward. The knowledge we share. The moment we see someone struggling and remember when that person was us." My children haven't spoken to me since the meeting. Ethan moved to another city. I heard he's working. Actual work. For the first time in his life. Sarah divorced Michael. I heard she's in therapy. Maybe someday, we'll talk again. Maybe not. And I've learned that's okay. Because loving someone doesn't mean letting them destroy you. And being a mother doesn't mean being a martyr. I spent 60 years believing I had to sacrifice everything to be worthy of love. But I was always worthy. I just needed to believe it. If this story touched something in you, tell me where you're watching from. If you've been betrayed by the people you loved most, know this. Your pain is valid, and your boundaries are sacred. If you've ever felt guilty for choosing yourself, remember, self-respect isn't selfish. It's survival. Subscribe for the next story. There are more truths to uncover. Because sometimes, the greatest inheritance we can leave isn't what we give to our children. It's what we give back to ourselves.